Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Silberstein. I'm the education reporter for the Albany Times-Union. It's Thursday, if you haven't been keeping track, which means we're here talking about education and some of the latest education news stories this week. This week was a really big week for education because school board elections took place, as well as school budget votes. And there were some surprising, interesting turns of event that we are going to be discussing. Today I have two guests with me, and I have Marie Whiles, who's the superintendent at Gilderland Schools, and Jay Worona from the New York State School Boards Association, and they're going to join me to discuss some of the intricacies of this year's election, why it was so unique, what turnout was like, and what the outcome was. I think the New York State School Boards Association recently put out some data about how many budgets were approved and how many were not approved. And if you have any questions, you feel free to post them on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, and we will try to address them as much as we can. Marie, thank you so much for joining me.
Sure.
AJ, thanks for joining me. So I guess we'll start with you, because I think Gilderland is one school district that's sort of an example of a large suburban school district that saw for an extraordinarily high turnout for the state's first ever by mail election. Like we discussed earlier, this year votes took place by mail because of the coronavirus. And so it was very unique. Can you talk to me about what you guys found?
Well, we found tremendous community participation. We had over 7,500 ballots returned. And in a typical budget vote and election, we would have between 2,000 and 2,500. So it was many times more than what we would expect. And it was an interesting process because they were all paper ballots. We counted them by hand and live streamed the process over all day yesterday and then about an hour this morning. So all of that was new and nerve-wracking, I will admit. But we are really thrilled with the outcome. We had 66% approval rating of our budget, similar for our bus proposition. And what it said to me was that democracy is alive and well, and that's exactly what we want, and that our community supports the work that we're doing. So I feel really grateful and really humbled today to have gone through all of that and come out where we are with that kind of support from our community.
It may have generated a lot more engagement than school elections typically do. Usually the turnout is something around 10%, right, Jay? Is that the average?
Yeah, it's really low usually. Yeah, because school elections are not during the regular season of November. They take place in May, so less people come out generally.
But executing a by-mail election based solely on absentee ballots is not an easy feat, especially for school districts which don't operate like boards of elections. Can you tell me about some of the logistical challenges that you guys encountered trying to set something like this up?
Well, we have a personal registration process here in Gilderland, which in one way made our the universe of people we needed to mail ballots to much more clean cut than some of our neighbors who don't have personal registration. So we knew we had to send 24,000 plus ballots out to our residents. And the logistics of that were helped immensely by participating in the regional approach that was led by our local BOCES to work with a vendor who could help us produce the ballot, print the ballot, stuff the envelopes, because there's 3 envelopes involved with the whole process, and then get them to the mail house and then get them to our residents. We were very fortunate. All of our materials went out on time. Ballots were received on June 1st and 2nd across our community. So people had plenty of time to open them, mail them back, or drop them off at the district office. When the governor extended the deadline to the 16th, we continued getting ballots a tray at a time. This was a real test of the local post office, who they were amazing, but I think they they had a workout for the week and a half or so when these ballots were coming through. But we had a lot of people working really hard. And I think for us, it went very smoothly. It was just a lot of time and expensive.
It didn't go as smoothly for some other districts. Jay, do you want to comment on?
Yeah, it was actually a disaster for a lot of districts. I mean, first of all, we definitely understand in this COVID-19 environment that all of us are trying to navigate through. The governor was trying to ensure that everyone in the state was provided their franchise, and that's important, right? But when we went to the option of having everybody get absentee ballots, the problem was, but by the time they got around to coming up with this process, it basically gave districts about a week or week and a half to send all of this stuff out and to get their act totally together. Now, a lot of districts that were larger used big mailing houses to do that. And there was a particular vendor in the state that serviced a lot of districts, and they had some problems securing envelopes. As a result of that, there was a very grave concern as to whether or not the ballots would be able to get out in time, people's franchise would be taken away, and who are they going to blame? Not the vendor, they blame the school district. So the governor then decided to extend until just this week the date in which we would, count all of those ballots. So we got an additional week, but going into this, we didn't know that. So superintendents and staffs were going absolutely bonkers trying to get this all together, but they did a yeoman's job. And the really cool thing is that it came out so positively, because if all of that effort resulted in a negative vote, that would have been extremely demoralizing, I think, to all of our school districts throughout the state.
Can you talk, I know the New York State School Boards Association put out some data of how many budgets were approved. Is it similar to last year's sort of ratio?
It's actually better than last year. We're usually in the high 90s. Now, I don't think we have computed every single district. There's a few outstanding, but the latest numbers that I got are that, and there's around 700 districts or so in the state. So we have 656 that passed. We know of 9 that failed. That's a 98.6% rate of passage. And then with a simple majority, the passage was 647 of those, 5 failed. And then, of course, there are those districts that were attempting to exceed the property tax cap, which would mean that they needed a super majority of their residents. And so 9 of those passed and 4 of those failed. And that was about a 69.2% passage rate. And that compares to something much, much lower in previous years. So the districts that were attempting to override the property tax cap did extremely on the more positive side this year.
Wow.
Than in previous years. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of superintendents I spoke to were a little worried that because they were seeing such a flood of ballots, they were worried, this sort of outcome defied their expectations. What do you sort of take away from this?
Well, this is what we understood. And those superintendents called us and we had many, many conversations. They feared that since about 70% of the individuals in our state don't have students in school, that if it was so much easier to vote through an absentee ballot process, people in this COVID-19 environment where everyone is frustrated and so many people, so many of your readers have lost their jobs. If you're asked a question as to whether you support the school budget, even if your heart told you yes, you might say, hey, I can't afford it. And so there was a fear that that when so many more people, in some instances, 8 times as many people voted than last year, that when so many more people voted, it would result in a negative vote because those people, the viewpoint was perhaps have less of an interest in securing a positive result. Well, as Marie just indicated before, that was exactly opposite. Everybody came out and supported their schools and said, hey, you know what? And this is my takeaway. We're not going to allow the ills of this pandemic to fall on the backs of our students. We're going to support their future. We're going to support our school districts and their budgets. And here's the other takeaway, that during this time, and I know Marie could speak more to this, but the school staff had to immediately provide distance learning and provide opportunities to kids in manners that they never, ever did before. And they worked in a way that we can all be so proud. And if the result was that residents were going to vote down budgets, that would be beyond demoralizing. The opposite came true, and that is making us feel so gratified and so happy.
So do you think, then I'll move to Jim's question about state funding, but do you guys think, both of you, is this something that, the state should do again if it's encouraging people to participate in, school matters?
When I will just talk about the cost. A typical election for us in Gilderland costs about $12,000. This one cost, we're still not adding up everything, closer to $100,000.
Wow.
So, you just think about all those envelopes. We needed 75,000 envelopes to carry this off. So I think I am all for increasing the participation in any opportunity to vote. But that cost that's a lot, especially when budgets are as difficult as they are, and we're trying to be as fiscally responsible as we can. So,
speaking of which, Jim from Facebook has a question. Do school districts have any idea what level of state funding they can expect in view of the state deficit? And I guess, Marie, how are you guys accounting for that uncertainty?
Well, we are fortunate. We were able to build a budget that I think is responsible. And we were able to hang on to the savings from the end of this current school year, when we weren't running buses, when we weren't heating buildings to the same level, when we weren't hiring substitutes, when we weren't paying overtime for various things. So we're able to hang on to that. So should we could probably absorb up to about a 10% reduction in foundation aid for this year. Now, what that means for the following year is terrible.
Gotcha.
But that's kind of our working plan at this point. We would rather not contemplate mid-year cuts or reductions.
Jay, we have, of course, 45 districts in the capital region that we cover. Could you just sort of give us a statewide view on how districts are dealing with this, not knowing what their state funding levels will be?
So let me answer that in 1 second. I just want to go back to one thing. We're also doing a survey, and I was just getting some results on my iPhone about the costs of this year versus last year, because you asked the question, hey, should we review these? And just so you know, our preliminary survey results are telling us this is costing 4 times as much money.
Wow.
So yes, it's increasing voter participation. As Marie said, who wouldn't want that? The question for our taxpayers in this grim economy is that worth that kind of a cost? That's going to be a public policy question. We'll let others answer that, but I just want you to know that there's a big cost associated with it. I know Marie is experiencing that personally and professionally in her district, but that is a statewide event. With respect to districts and your question about budgets, this is a big deal. The governor's been talking about it, and we know that his answer to us is going to be dependent upon whether federal stimulus monies are coming our way. And we still haven't heard from Washington. So we're hoping and we're praying that, the decision as to whether we get these federal stimulus dollars will not be decided along political lines, that our state will be considered in the way that it needs to be considered for purposes of, again, not sacrificing our kids, because that's what's at stake here. Marie knows this as a superintendent. This is going to have a dire impact on educational opportunities for our students. There's just no way else to describe that, and staffing ratios and all of that sort of thing. And we're hopeful. We're very happy about the budgets passing, but then you get to the darker news, I suppose, which is, okay, what does this really mean? And we're not there yet in terms of knowing the impact, but I can tell you that everyone is very nervous about this.
Is the School Boards Association supportive of some sort of wealth tax in the event that federal funding doesn't come in?
We don't have a position on, robbing the rich to pay the poor. That is not really a position that we're maintaining, only because, quite frankly, we're a bipartisan organization. We have districts in all types of forms and circumstances, but we do believe that all of the districts should be lifted, and no kids should be sacrificed in their educational opportunities.
Fair enough. All right, did we cover, I guess let's move on to summer school. Marie, I know you guys are working really hard. The governor announced that, summer day camps are okay as long as they maintain certain social distancing guidelines. And there was a really strong push from advocates and parents who have children with special needs and disabilities to also have summer school so their kids get the structure that they desperately need. And also kids who were, didn't necessarily benefit from remote learning as much because they needed a little bit more hands-on guidance. Could you talk to me about some of the challenges of getting a summer school program off the ground?
Well, the short notice is probably the biggest one. We had begun planning earlier in the year for a in-person extended school year program for our students with disabilities. And then when everything closed down, we shifted our plans to think about a more like what we're doing now, or we just ended the remote plans, fully cognizant of the fact that the children that we would be serving during the summer may have struggled more with that remote platform than, the general education population. So we were rather lukewarm on offering it remotely. And we heard from many, many parents that they just were kind of almost crestfallen with the idea of doing 6 more weeks of online learning.
Yeah.
And then the governor loosened that up, and we had strong feelings in our community that we should try to pull it off. So we have a team who's been working constantly to figure out, where the children will be, how we'll get them to school safely. Because, buses are not the best for social distancing. So we've identified a location. We're actually putting up some large tents outside. So some of the programming can be outdoors, which is great for kids for lots of reasons. We have all kinds of protocols to make sure our faculty and staff are healthy, that they have the appropriate PPE. Same for children. We want to monitor to make sure that when they come to school, they are in good health. And then at the same time, we are thinking about a remote element of our program too, because we have some children who either have underlying medical conditions that would make them perhaps more at risk. We also have faculty who have similar kinds of concerns. So we're doing a parallel track of some remote learning opportunities as well. Lots of details, deadline coming fast, but we surveyed our parents, and the vast majority of them will be sending their children to our summer program.
I know a lot of districts aren't able to do that, provide that. I think BOCES so far has decided not to provide. Usually it's one of the largest providers of summer programs for children with disabilities. Are you getting requests from outside the district since there's so few seats available?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And the challenge would be, we can make this happen because our numbers are small, and therefore we can spread people out and provide that social distancing.
Mm-hmm.
Large numbers are where we have the challenge. So, and I understand the BOCES decision, but they also provide schooling for our most severely disabled children, many of whom have multiple disabilities that affect their, they're medically fragile. And so there is risk involved. And so I think every school district has to weigh the risks with their capacity in order to pull it off. We have done exactly that, and think that we have a good plan to keep everyone safe and to keep everyone engaged.
Jay, do you want to weigh in? Is this something that?
Yeah, I mean, when the governor came up with that executive order that indicated that schools would, could be open, and that was, heralded exactly as you said by the disability community as being a win, and it is, and who wouldn't want these children to be served? I mean, the frustration I think that districts throughout the state were experiencing is not the purpose and not the intent, but the governor himself is involved in this Reimagine New York task force. The Board of Regents are doing the same thing. And one of the purposes, as we all know, is to decide how and if we can safely open our schools again in the fall. So to have an executive order that says, oh, but right now we're going to reopen our schools a month from now for purposes of dispensing, educational services for disabled children, it was kind of a Hobson's choice. On the one hand, it's kind of a bad PR move. You say you can't do it. Well, then you look like you don't want to do it versus you don't feel you can safely do it. So, in a perfect world, we would have had more time to figure this out. I absolutely understand where the governor was coming from, so I'm not trying to be critical of that, but the logistics from a statewide perspective, exactly as Marie said, many districts, many BOCES just could not get it together with such limited time.
I guess it's unfortunate because, a lot of these students really, I hear from parents every day who say that they, are desperate to find some structure for their child who.
Absolutely. And they're right. And they're owed that. Absolutely. But we want to keep them safe.
So I guess to finish off, I just wanted to talk briefly about graduations. The governor approved some sort of in-person gathering. I guess, Marie, we'll start with you. What's Gilderland doing for graduation?
Well, we've had plans A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. So I think we've landed in a really good place. On Saturday night, the 20th, we will have the first ceremony, which will be an hour and 15-minute video presentation shown at the Jericho Drive-In Theater. So our students are coming in cap and gown, and we'll watch. We've done the whole ceremony just like we would normally. I actually have the program. I just got it today, right off the press. It's beautiful. So we'll do the regular ceremony, and the roll call will happen with the students' graduation photo coming up on the screen. And then on the following Saturday, the 27th, we are going to do a series of mini ceremonies where small groups of students, I think 53 at a time, and their families will come. We've built a stage in front of school. We've got decorations, we've got a tent, and we'll do that walk the stage moment that is so iconic for this huge milestone in our students' lives. It's not what we usually do. And I know some people are not thrilled by these alternatives, but I think they will be forever remembered.
Yeah.
Perhaps in hindsight become even more special. So that's what we're doing. And I know there's lots of variations on a theme across the state.
Yeah, I know there were some petitions going around in pretty much every district of parents. Obviously they care about their children's safety, but this is I feel like their children have missed so many milestones this year. This is just really important when you're a senior in high school.
It is.
Jay, are we seeing similar sort of setups? I think one of the requirements was that it takes place outside, and what were the other requirements?
Yeah, I don't have the executive order right in front of me, but I think you're exactly right. It's supposed to be, with all the social distancing and all of the science and data that the governor is relying upon. And I think we're seeing statewide, not just the ideas that Marie was speaking about, but the passion in which she was speaking. If you heard her speaking, she wants to be able to provide, as a superintendent, these opportunities for her students. It's a very saddening situation because we remember experiencing these things ourselves, and these were wonderful moments in our life. So what I'm seeing statewide is the same kind of fervor on the part of educators to get this right for our kids, because we only have this one opportunity. And I think the thing that hopefully time will mark us all as is at least trying to do the right thing in very, very challenging circumstances.
Were there any sort of logistical challenges that you encountered, Marie, in terms of planning this, like things that were asked for that you just unfortunately had to compromise on?
It's always the logistics. And, we have 380-ish graduates. So our class is big. So just the size of the district makes this more challenging. Smaller districts can probably find ways to have, all of their graduates and their parents in the same place, and maybe even have, the limit there is 150 people. So having multiple ceremonies is a challenge, bringing people onto campus, getting them off of campus, monitoring the social distancing. I mean, it's such an emotional experience, asking, lifelong friends not to give each other a hug is going to be a hard ask, but one that we have to do because we just need to keep everybody safe. Right. My high school principal has been really a saint, patient, thoughtful, kind, creative, tenacious, thick-skinned. So I'm just hoping for 2 really nice ceremonies and happy, joyful people recognizing that this is still a milestone. It's still something to be proud of.
Thank you guys so much for joining me. If there's no other questions on social media, I guess we'll sign off for now. Thank you again. It's really, great to hear sort of your views.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Take care.